What is good, YouTube? Quinn Wade, basketball analysis. Coming to y'all with a quick video. We're going to talk about 5 players this year. This happens every draft. This happens every single year where a guy has a major injury, just doesn't have the game to pan out, doesn't have the opportunity. So the league either doesn't want to give them the opportunity because they see them a certain way, they feel some way about them, or the league just gave up on them. And it's unfortunate, but it's a part of the business. They want to go with what works, what's hot, and what sells. And some of these guys just fall short. Some of these guys, just couldn't, you know, get to the point where they needed to be. But well, a lot of these guys, rookie contracts are up and they're flying around, and eventually all things come to an end, especially because a lot of these guys are still young enough to where they should get opportunities. But eventually, as free agency comes, drafts continue to come, and overseas players enter the market, more and more spots get taken in the NBA, and a lot of these guys find themselves eventually out of the league. Where a lot of these guys was high draft picks and they had plenty of talent. That's why they were drafted so high in potential. Some of these guys have reasons why they didn't reach their potential, or even reasons why they never, became what people thought that they could be, and that's why it's called potential. Or they just, didn't cut it, and that happens too in the league. And you can look at a guy like Jabari Parker. Jabari Parker was the number 2 pick. People looked at him as the face of a franchise, one of the next up and coming stars. And time after time, he had big injuries, or he just couldn't figure it out, or he just couldn't take advantage of the opportunities. And it sucks because I believed in Jabari. I wanted to see him succeed, and to see him on a part where he's bouncing around before he's even in his 30s, and he's trying to do whatever he can to stay in the league is unfortunate, but it happens. Sometimes you become that guy that nobody wants to become. And for Jabari Parker to have such a huge fan base and huge expectations, and even being pretty good in college to even lock up the number 2 pick under Wiggins, um, you could even say Wiggins has been disappointing because he also, was deemed possibly the next superstar. And it was because of his upside and potential. He became more of a starter than a franchise altering player. And you even look at Harry Giles, was ranked at one point the number 1 player in high school and destined to be great. And he had a major injury, and it even hurt him in college, where he was never the same, never dominant, and teams didn't look at him the same. Teams didn't want him because of those injuries and what it could do to a big man. You don't want your big man to have lower body injuries, and for him not to be the greatest athlete after that, plus not a great skilled player, not being able to be a good 3-point shooter or floor spacer, or even a great free throw shooter, or even a dominant rebounder, it kind of made you wonder what is his greatest strength as a guy that has not played on this level, has not even, proved himself on the NBA level. And these are questions that you have people asking and wondering before he even gets to the NBA after that injury. And, his career has already seen him bounce for multiple teams. And now he's in a similar situation like a lot of these other guys on the list, where we know he can play, we know he's a solid player, but those guys are the ones that fight every day to stay in the league, and those are the guys that eventually get phased out once somebody replaces them in the future. And it sucks because I know a person that really loved Harry and really supported him as a fan, and to see his career become where he went from being a known next superstar to just being another guy in the league is unfortunate. But it happens, and it happened to him. Alex Lynn was a former lottery pick, and a lot of people looked at him as a guy with good hands and a guy that had a good body and good mobility and should be a potential quality starter in this league. And it never even came close to happening either. He got to Phoenix and he could never really figure out what his offensive game was. He could never become a great defensive player either, and he never was a great rebounder. So it kind of made you wonder, what can Alex Lynn bring to a team if we can't rely on him to do anything significant at a great level? And we seen Phoenix eventually get rid of him, and then he bounced around leagues where teams were desperate for size and physicality, and Alex Lynn has that still in his genes and in his blood and in his DNA. And other than that, he has developed a decent offensive game, but it hasn't been consistent or highly dominant. But he is a guy that understands his role and will do whatever it takes, to stay in the league. And he has shown that the last couple of teams that he was on, but those teams are not looking to keep him long term or don't find him as a long term solution, which means he finds himself in the same predicament like a lot of these other guys. Dennis Smith Jr., I wasn't high on Dennis Smith Jr. in the draft. I feel like the Mavericks took what they thought was the best pick probably there. And the fact that Dennis Smith Jr. came into the league with high upside, a guy that can jump out the gym, a guy that can create his own shot to a certain extent, and a guy that was exciting to watch. You want to build a franchise around a player like that, but he never could really get the jump shot, which was always a problem with him in high school and college, was the consistency from his perimeter shooting, and he never was able to figure it out. He never was able to get it going, and the fact that he wasn't a great offensive player, a guy that didn't really try at all defensively, plus really couldn't even figure it out as a passer and playmaker, made you wonder, will he ever be able to be a superstar like we thought he could be? I wasn't one of the people, but people thought that he had that type of upside if he gets the right coaching and the right work ethic to bring it out of his body. That he has the talent, he has the athleticism in the body, in the size, but can he, get the skill level where it needs to be a legitimate franchise changing or all star? And as the season continued, he started falling down the draft, and even to the point where people thought that he could be a possible steal. But he still ended up going in the lottery, and the Mavericks gave up on him within a year and a couple months, and he's been bouncing around the league since. Jaleel Okafor, he had suffered a lot of injuries, but never was a great defensive center. Never was a great dominant offensive guy when he was healthy, and never really impacted winning, even when he was with the Sixers. I know you can blame him for a little bit of that because he didn't really try defensively. Really wasn't the greatest team player, but also, his team really didn't care about winning, and neither did the organization, and they didn't put the requisite talent around him to even, you know, put winning culture and winning talent around him to really compete. But he was deemed as the next generational center because of his footwork and his ability to have a dominant NBA ready post game, like Jabari Parker had an NBA ready offensive game, and Jaleel Okafor was that too. But he was never able to, dominate at the NBA level, and he was never able to evolve or adjust or even, expand his game at a high level at all, and he ended up falling short with injuries and lack of success. And now he's hanging on to a roster too after being deemed the next generational big. That didn't happen. It happened for Towns to a certain extent, but it definitely didn't even come close to really happening for Jaleel Okafor. And another guy that in the video is Frank Ninakina. This guy had a lot of hype because he got drafted by the Knicks, who has a huge, demanding fan base, and he did not come close, even a shine of being great. He never was able to have a great 2-3 weeks in the league. Never was able to figure out how to shoot. Never was able to figure out how to be a playmaker. Never was able to be a threat on the offensive end, and his defense wasn't able to sustain him in the league, as it was never a elite skill that people thought that he might have. He was always decent to solid at best, but he was never elite to dominant at that end to make up for the lack of offensive talent that he didn't have. And he finds himself in a situation where he's young, he still has upside, he still has potential, and he still has the body for the positions that he played. But will he ever be able to figure out the offensive game to where it can make him warrant to get more minutes and more opportunity, even if it's as a playmaker or even if it's as an offensive guy? We just don't know what his ceiling is, and we just don't know what he can be, as he was never able to put anything significant together to warrant him staying in the league for a long time, which is unfortunate. But just like these other guys, you just never know. Being a lottery pick is a dream. It's something that a lot of people want to be. Is a lot of people work hard for that, but that doesn't mean they're going to have great careers. People fail, people don't succeed, and people come up short. And a lot of these guys made it to the league. They became lottery picks. They became millionaires. But at the same time, they didn't become the players that we thought that they could be. And that's why we always say we know the sure things and we know potential. Injuries happen, situation happens, and sometimes you just don't pan out or make the cut at the NBA. But they dream still technically came true, but it might be short lived in the next couple of years as these guys might be out of the league. It happens. It's a part of life. It's a part of the business. It just, we have to see what happens next. Other than that, see y'all possibly tomorrow. Quinn Wade, basketball analysis. I'm gone.